The sun was setting over the rolling fields of corn and wheat, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air carried the faint smell of earth and freshly cut grass. Emma Carter stood on the porch of her family's old farmhouse, wiping, her hands on her faded jeans. She had just finished feeding the chickens and stacking hay bales in the barn. Her father, who usually helped with these chores, was resting inside after a long day working the tractor. Life on the farm wasn't easy, but it was all Emma had ever known. As she leaned against the wooden railing of the porch, listening to the crickets chirping and the distant hoot of an owl, something unusual caught her attention. A soft knock came from the front door. It was faint, almost hesitant, but unmistakable. Visitors were rare this far out in the countryside, especially at this hour. Curious, Emma turned and walked back into the house. She opened the door slowly, peering outside. At first she didn't see anyone. Then, stepping closer, she noticed a figure standing a few feet away, half hidden by the shadows of the porch. Light. He looked tired, his clothes torn and dirty, his face streaked with mud. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes held a mixture of desperation and hope. But what really caught Emma's attention was the uniform he wore, military green, though it was now smeared with dirt and patched up in places. "Can I help you?" Emma asked cautiously, taking a small step back. She didn't mean to sound unkind, but strangers showing up like this weren't common around here. The man hesitated before speaking, as if gathering his strength. I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice hoarse. "My name is Ryan, Private Ryan." He pointed to the name tag stitched onto his uniform, though it was barely visible under the grime. "I got separated from my unit. We were supposed to be doing some training exercises, but things went wrong. I've been walking for hours trying to find help." Emma studied him carefully. He looked harmless enough, but she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. What if this was some kind of trick? Still, there was something about the way he spoke, his tone sincere, his posture slumped with exhaustion, that made her doubt he was lying. And even if he was, could she really turn him away when he clearly needed help? After a moment of hesitation, she nodded. "Come inside," she said finally, stepping aside to let him in. "You look like you could use a break." Ryan entered the house awkwardly, ducking slightly to avoid hitting his head on the low doorframe. The warmth of the room seemed to hit him immediately, and he swayed on his feet for a second before steadying himself. Emma guided him to a chair near the fireplace where embers still glowed faintly from earlier that evening. "Wait here," she told him, disappearing into the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned with a glass of water and a plate of food. Leftovers, from dinner. Nothing fancy, but enough to fill an empty stomach. Ryan accepted them gratefully, gulping down the water and eating quickly, though not greedily. Emma watched him silently, trying to decide what to make of this unexpected guest. Once he had eaten a little, Ryan set the plate down and looked up at her. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me." Emma shrugged, brushing off his gratitude. "It's no big deal. Anyone would have done the same." But deep down, she knew that wasn't entirely true. Living so far from town, most people wouldn't think twice about passing by someone in need. Yet here she was, letting a stranger, a soldier, no less, into her home without knowing much about him. Something about his story tugged at her heartstrings. Maybe it was the way he talked, or maybe it was the vulnerability in his eyes. Whatever it was, she couldn't bring herself to send him back out into the cold night. "So," she began, breaking the silence, "what exactly happened? You said something about training exercises?" Ryan nodded, leaning forward slightly. "Yeah. My unit. We're part of a local reserve battalion. We were sent out to practice navigation skills in the dense woods a few miles from here. Everything was fine until our GPS devices malfunctioned. Without them, we got lost. Some of us tried to retrace our steps, but the terrain was rough and we ended up splitting up. I volunteered to scout ahead and find help, but..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "I guess I underestimated how hard it would be to navigate alone." Emma frowned, imagining the scenario. The woods surrounding the farm were vast and wild, filled with steep hills, thick underbrush, and winding streams. Even locals sometimes got turned around in there. For someone unfamiliar with the area, it must have been terrifying. "How long have you been out there?" she asked. 2 days, maybe 3, Ryan replied. "I lost count after a while. I've been surviving on whatever I could scavenge, berries, nuts, stuff like that. But it's not enough. That meal you gave me? It's the first real food I've had since this whole thing started." Emma felt a pang of sympathy. 2 or 3 days alone in the wilderness, with no food, no shelter, and no way to contact anyone. It was a miracle he'd made it this far. She glanced toward the window, where darkness had fully settled over the landscape. There was no way he could leave tonight, not in his condition. "You should stay here for the night," she said firmly. "You're in no shape to go anywhere right now. Besides, it's dangerous out there after dark." Ryan hesitated, clearly unsure whether to accept her offer. Finally, he nodded. "If you're sure it's okay. I don't want to impose." "It's fine," Emma assured him. "There's a spare room upstairs. You can clean up and get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll figure out how to get you back to your unit." Relief washed over Ryan's face, and for the first time since arriving, he managed a small smile. "Thank you," he said again. "Really, I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Emma waved off his words. "Don't worry about it. Just focus on getting better. We'll take care of the rest tomorrow." With that, she showed him to the spare room, lending him a pair of her father's old pajamas and a towel. As Ryan disappeared into the bathroom to wash up, Emma lingered in the hallway for a moment, thinking. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. Her quiet, predictable life had just taken an unexpected turn. The next morning, Emma woke up early, as she always did. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light over the fields outside her window. She stretched and got out of bed, pulling on her boots and a warm flannel shirt. Normally, she would head straight to the barn to check on the animals or start preparing breakfast for herself and her father. But today felt different. Today there was someone else in the house, a stranger who had stumbled into her life the night before. As she made her way downstairs, she could hear faint sounds coming from the kitchen. Peeking inside, she saw Ryan sitting at the table looking much better than he had the previous evening. His hair was damp from washing, and he was wearing the borrowed pajamas, which were slightly too big for him but clean and comfortable. He looked up when he heard her footsteps and gave her a small smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice clearer now, though still tinged with exhaustion. "I hope you don't mind. I helped myself to some coffee. I figured it was okay since you were kind enough to let me stay." Emma shook her head, returning his smile. "Don't worry about it. Coffee's there for the taking. Did you sleep well?" Ryan nodded. "Better than I have in days. That bed was like heaven compared to the ground I've been sleeping on." Emma chuckled softly, pouring herself a cup of coffee and joining him at the table. For a moment, they sat in silence, sipping their drinks and watching the sunlight creep across the wooden floor. Then Emma spoke up. "So what's the plan for today?" she asked, setting her mug down. "Do you know how to get back to your unit?" Ryan frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. "Not exactly. I mean, I have a general idea of where we were. Supposed to meet up, but without a map or proper directions, it's hard to say for sure. Plus, I'm not even sure if they're still there. They might have moved on by now." Emma thought for a moment. "Well, we can't send you out there unprepared. You'll need supplies, food, water, maybe even a change of clothes. And I think I have an old map of the area somewhere. It's not perfect, but it should help you navigate." Ryan looked at her gratefully. "You'd really do that? After everything you've already done?" Emma shrugged, standing up from the table. "Like I said last night, it's no big deal. Besides, you're not going to survive out there without help. Let me see what I can find." She disappeared into the pantry, rummaging through shelves filled with canned goods, dried fruits, and other staples. After a few minutes, she emerged, with a canvas bag, filling it with items she thought might be useful: a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, some apples, a couple of energy bars, and a few bottles of water. Next, she went to the closet near the front door, digging around until she found the map she'd mentioned earlier. It was worn and folded many times, but it was still legible. When she returned to the kitchen, Ryan was standing by the sink, staring out the window at the vast expanse of farmland stretching beyond the house. He turned when he heard her approach, his expression softening as he saw the bag in her hands. "This is incredible," he said, taking the bag from her. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Emma replied, handing him the map. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Those woods are no joke, especially if you're alone." Ryan nodded solemnly. "I will. And thank you again for everything. I don't think I'd have made it this far without your help." Emma smiled, though a small part of her felt uneasy. She didn't know why exactly. Maybe it was the uncertainty of sending him off into the unknown, or maybe it was the nagging feeling that something bigger was looming just out of sight. Whatever it was, she pushed it aside for now. Ryan needed her help, and she wasn't about to let him down. After finishing his coffee, Ryan changed back into his uniform, which Emma had washed and left to dry overnight. Though it was still a little stiff from being cleaned hastily, it was better than nothing. As he packed the last of the supplies into the bag, Emma walked him to the door. "Here," she said, holding out a flashlight she had grabbed from the drawer. "It might come in handy if you end up walking after dark." Ryan took it, tucking it into the side pocket of the bag. "You've thought of everything," he said, smiling. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Emma waved dismissively. "Just get back to your unit safely, all right? That's all the thanks I need." With one final nod, Ryan stepped off the porch and onto the gravel driveway. He paused for a moment, turning back to look at her. "Take care of yourself, Emma. And thank you. Really." Then he turned and began walking toward the edge of the property, disappearing into the morning mist. Emma watched him go, her arms crossed tightly against the cool breeze. For a while she stood there, staring at the spot where he had vanished, her thoughts swirling uncertainly. Later that day, Emma tried to focus on her usual chores, but her mind kept drifting back to Ryan. She wondered how far he had gotten, whether he had found the landmarks marked on the map, or if he was struggling to make sense of the dense forest. Her father, noticing her distraction, asked if something was wrong. "It's nothing," she assured him, brushing off his concern. "Just thinking about stuff." Her father raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Life on the farm was busy enough without worrying about things beyond their control. By late afternoon, Emma had managed to distract herself with work, feeding the animals, fixing a broken fence, and checking the irrigation system. But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues once more, she found herself glancing toward the woods again, wondering if Ryan was safe. And then, just as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, an unfamiliar sound cut through the quiet evening air. At first, Emma thought it was thunder, but the noise was too rhythmic, too mechanical. She stepped outside, squinting into the distance, and froze. 2 helicopters were descending toward the farmhouse, their rotors whipping up clouds of dust and debris. Emma's heart raced as she watched them land in the field behind the barn, their lights cutting through the darkness like beams from another world. Soldiers spilled out of the choppers, moving quickly and purposefully. One of them approached the house, calling out to her. "Ma'am, are you Emma Carter?" Emma nodded, her voice catching in her throat. Yes, I am." "What's going on?" The soldier, a tall man with a stern face and a captain's insignia on his uniform, introduced himself. "I'm Captain Mitchell. We're looking for Private Ryan. Do you know where he is?" Emma's mind raced. Had something happened to Ryan? Was he hurt? Or worse? She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "He was here last night. He stayed the night and left this morning. I gave him supplies and a map to help him find his way back to his unit." Captain Mitchell exchanged a glance with one of the other soldiers before turning back to her. "We've been searching for him for days. He got separated from us during a training exercise and we lost contact. When he didn't return, we feared the worst." Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. So Ryan hadn't been lying. He really had been in trouble, and now it seemed his unit had finally found him. Or rather, they had found her. "Follow me," she said, leading them to the barn where Ryan had spent the night. As they approached, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: relief that Ryan was safe, pride in having helped him, and a strange sense of awe at the unexpected turn her ordinary life had taken. When they reached the barn, Ryan was nowhere to be seen, but the soldiers immediately began combing the area, shouting his name and scanning the surroundings with flashlights. Emma lingered nearby, watching as events unfolded. She didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. Her simple act of kindness had set something much larger into motion. The soldiers moved quickly, their boots crunching against the gravel as they spread out across the property. Captain Mitchell stayed close to Emma, asking her questions about Ryan's appearance and the direction he had taken when he left that morning. Emma did her best to answer clearly, though her mind was racing with uncertainty. She had done what she could to help Ryan, but now she couldn't shake the worry that maybe it hadn't been enough. "Are you sure he went east?" Captain Mitchell asked, pointing toward the dense woods lining the edge of the farm. "That's where we last tracked his signal before it disappeared." Emma nodded firmly. "Yes. I gave him a map and marked the route to the nearest road. He said he thought his unit might be waiting near a clearing about 5 miles from here." Captain Mitchell studied the map she handed him, his brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment, he turned to one of his men. "Sergeant, take 2 teams and sweep the area around the clearing. If he's still out there, he's probably heading that way." The sergeant saluted and jogged off, barking orders to the others. Meanwhile, Captain Mitchell turned back to Emma, his expression softening slightly. "You've been very helpful, Miss Carter. Private Ryan is lucky to have crossed paths with someone like you." Emma shrugged, feeling a little awkward under his praise. "I just did what anyone would have done. He needed help, so I helped him." Captain Mitchell smiled faintly. "Not everyone would have opened their door to a stranger, especially out here. You took a risk, and it may have saved his life." Before Emma could respond, another soldier approached, holding a radio. "Sir, we've got movement on the eastern perimeter. Could be Ryan." Captain Mitchell's eyes lit up. "Let's move," he said, turning to Emma. "Stay here, Miss Carter. It's not safe for civilians to get involved in this kind of operation." Emma hesitated, wanting to argue, but knowing he was right. Instead, she stepped back onto the porch, watching as the soldiers fanned out into the night. The helicopters remained on standby, their rotors spinning lazily as the search continued. The air buzzed with tension, and Emma found herself gripping the railing tightly, her knuckles white. Time seemed to crawl by. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, made her heart leap, hoping it meant Ryan had been found. Finally, after what felt like hours, a shout broke through the darkness. "We've got him! Over here!" Emma's breath caught in her throat. She leaned forward, straining to see beyond the trees. Moments later, a group of soldiers emerged from the woods, supporting a figure between them. Even in the dim light, she recognized Ryan immediately. His uniform was even dirtier than before, and he looked utterly exhausted, but he was alive. Captain Mitchell hurried over, clapping Ryan on the shoulder. "Private, you had us worried sick. What happened?" Ryan managed a weak smile. Turned around again after leaving the farm. Thought I was close to the rendezvous point, but guess I wasn't as sharp as I thought." The captain shook his head, though there was no anger in his voice. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." As the soldiers helped Ryan toward the helicopters, he caught sight of Emma standing on the porch. He stopped suddenly, pulling away from the others to walk, or rather stumble, toward her. The soldiers let him go, understanding the importance of the moment. "Emma," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion, "I can't thank you enough. If it weren't for you." Emma cut him off, smiling gently. "Don't mention it. Just focus on getting better, all right? You look like you've been through hell." Ryan chuckled softly, though it turned into a cough. "Feels like it too. But seriously, I'll never forget what you did for me." Before he could say more, Captain Mitchell intervened, placing a firm hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Come on, Private, we need to get you checked out." Ryan nodded reluctantly, allowing himself to be led back to the helicopters. As he climbed aboard, he turned one last time to wave at Emma. She waved back, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and pride. She had done the right thing, and now Ryan was safe. Once the helicopters lifted off, disappearing into the night sky, Emma finally allowed herself to relax. She sank onto the porch steps, staring up at the stars twinkling above. The adrenaline that had kept her going all evening was fading, leaving behind a deep sense of satisfaction and curiosity. Her father, who had been watching silently from the doorway, finally spoke. "Well, that was something I didn't expect to see tonight." Emma laughed softly, shaking her head. "Neither did I, Dad. Neither did I." Her father sat down beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You did good, kiddo. Real good. Not many people would have done what you did." Emma leaned into him, feeling grateful for his support. "I just hope he's okay. He looked pretty rough." "He'll be fine," her father assured her. "Those soldiers know what they're doing. And besides, he's got a fighting spirit. You saw that yourself." Emma nodded, letting her father's words sink in. Still, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would she ever hear from Ryan again? Or would this strange chapter in her life simply fade away, remembered only as a bizarre but heartwarming story? The next morning, the farm returned to its usual rhythm. Chickens clucked, cows mooed, and the fields stretched endlessly under the bright blue sky. Life went on as it always had, but Emma noticed subtle changes within herself. Helping Ryan had reminded her of something important. Even in the quietest corners of the world, acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she might never fully understand. Later that afternoon, as she was mending a fence near the barn, she heard the sound of an approaching vehicle. Turning, she saw a military jeep pulling into the driveway. Her stomach tightened as she recognized Captain Mitchell stepping out, followed by another officer carrying a clipboard. "Miss Carter," Captain Mitchell called, walking toward her. "Do you have a moment?" Emma wiped her hands on her jeans and nodded. "Of course, what's wrong?" Captain Mitchell smiled, holding up a hand to reassure her. "Nothing's wrong. In fact, quite the opposite. We wanted to thank you personally for your role in bringing Private Ryan back to us." Emma blinked, surprised. "You already thanked me last night. There's no need for anything else." The captain shook his head. "What you did deserves more than just a verbal acknowledgement. The Army takes care of its own, but we also recognize the contributions of civilians like yourself. That's why we'd like to offer you something in return." Emma frowned, confused. "Something in return? Like what?" The other officer stepped forward, consulting his clipboard. "We've reviewed your situation, Miss Carter, and we believe we can assist you in several ways. For instance, we have programs designed to support rural communities, particularly farmers. We could provide funding to upgrade your equipment, improve irrigation systems, or even expand your operations. Additionally, we'd like to invite you to visit our base sometime, where you'll be formally recognized for your bravery and generosity." Emma stared at them, stunned. Upgrading the farm's equipment? Recognition from the military? It sounded almost too good to be true. For years, she and her father had struggled to keep the farm running, battling rising costs and unpredictable weather. This kind of help could make all the difference. I don't know what to say," she stammered. Finally, Captain Mitchell grinned. "Say yes, Miss Carter, you've earned it." Emma glanced at her father, who was watching from the porch, his face glowing with pride. Then she turned back to the officers, nodding slowly. "Okay. Yes, thank you." The officers exchanged satisfied smiles, and Captain Mitchell extended his hand. "You won't regret it, Miss Carter. On behalf of the United States Army, thank you once again for everything you've done." As they drove away, Emma stood in the driveway, her mind reeling. Her simple act of kindness had not only saved a soldier's life, it had opened doors she never imagined possible. And while she knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Sometimes, life threw unexpected challenges your way, but sometimes, it also brought unexpected blessings. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind for Emma. The visit from the Army officers had left her with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. Her life was about to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. For years, running, the farm had been a constant struggle. Equipment broke down too often, repairs cost more than they could afford, and bad weather always seemed to strike at the worst possible times. But now, with the promise of support from the military, there was hope on the horizon. Emma's father, who had spent decades working the land, was equally stunned by the turn of events. "Never thought I'd see the day when the Army would step in to help us," he said one evening, as they sat together on the porch. "It's a miracle, plain and simple." Emma smiled, leaning back in her chair. "I didn't do anything special, Dad. Just helped someone who needed it." Her father shook his head firmly. "Don't sell yourself short, kiddo. Not everyone would have done what you did. You opened your home to a stranger, gave him food and shelter, and pointed him in the right direction. That's more than most folks would have done." Emma didn't argue, though she still found it hard to believe her actions had led to such an incredible outcome. Still, she couldn't deny the excitement bubbling inside her. Over the next few weeks, representatives from the Army visited the farm multiple times, assessing the equipment, inspecting the fields, and discussing potential upgrades. They brought engineers, agricultural experts, and even financial advisors to ensure everything was planned carefully. At first, Emma felt overwhelmed by all the attention. She wasn't used to being the center of focus, especially not from people in uniforms carrying clipboards. But as the visits continued, she began to relax, realizing these strangers genuinely wanted to help. They weren't just offering solutions, they were listening to her ideas and concerns, treating her and her father as partners in the process. One afternoon, while waiting for another group of Army officials to arrive, Emma decided to take a walk through the fields. It was something she did whenever she needed time to think. The golden stalks of wheat swayed gently in the breeze, their rustling creating a soothing melody. She walked slowly, letting her mind wander. What would the farm look like after the upgrades? Would they finally be able to expand the orchard her mother had dreamed of planting before she passed away? Could they hire extra hands during harvest season without worrying about breaking the bank? As she reached the edge of the property, she noticed a familiar figure standing near the fence. It took her a moment to recognize him. Ryan. He was wearing civilian clothes this time, a simple t-shirt and jeans, but his face was unmistakable. Seeing him sent a jolt of surprise through her. "Ryan?" she called out, quickening her pace. "What are you doing here?" Ryan turned, smiling sheepishly. "Hey, Emma, I wanted to stop by and thank you properly. Captain Mitchell told me about everything the Army is doing for you and your dad. I figured I should come see it for myself." Emma laughed softly, shaking her head. "You didn't have to do that. I'm just glad you're okay." Ryan stepped closer, his expression turning serious. "No, really. I mean it. You saved my life, Emma. If you hadn't taken me in that night, I don't know what would have happened. And now, because of you, my unit's safe and I'm standing here instead of, well, somewhere else." Emma looked away, feeling a little embarrassed by his words. Like I said before, anyone would have done the same. Ryan shook his head, firmly. "Not true. Most people wouldn't have risked opening their door to a dirty, lost soldier in the middle of nowhere. You trusted me, and that's not something everyone would do." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. Finally, Ryan cleared his throat. "Anyway, I also wanted to give you this." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Emma unfolded it curiously. It was a handwritten letter, written in neat block letters. "Dear Emma, I can't put into words how much your kindness meant to me. You reminded me that even in the toughest situations, there are still good people willing to lend a hand. Thanks to you, I made it back to my unit, and now I'll never forget the lesson you taught me. Humanity matters. If you ever need anything or just want to visit, I'd love to show you around the base sometime. Take care of yourself, and thank you again for everything. Sincerely, Ryan." Emma felt a lump rise in her throat as she read the note. When she looked up, Ryan was watching her closely, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I'll keep it," she said softly, folding the letter and slipping it into her pocket. "And maybe someday I'll take you up on that offer to visit the base." Ryan grinned, looking relieved. "Anytime. Seriously, you're always welcome." Before either of them could say more, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted the moment. Emma glanced over her shoulder to see the Army representatives arriving. She turned back to Ryan, gesturing toward the house. "Do you want to come meet them? They're here to talk about the upgrades." Ryan hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. Might as well see what kind of trouble I caused." Together they walked back to the farmhouse where the officers greeted Emma warmly before turning their attention to Ryan. There were handshakes, introductions, and plenty of laughter as the group discussed the plans for the farm. Ryan stayed quiet for the most part, listening intently and occasionally chiming in with suggestions based on his own experiences growing up in a small town. By the time the meeting ended, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the property. As the officers packed up their things and prepared to leave, Ryan lingered behind, helping Emma carry some of the documents inside. "You didn't have to stick around," Emma said as they entered the kitchen, "but thanks for staying." Ryan shrugged, setting the papers down on the table. "Felt like the least I could do. Besides, it's nice to see how much good came out of that crazy night." Emma nodded, pouring 2 glasses of lemonade and handing one to him. "It's strange, isn't it, how one decision can change so many things?" Ryan sipped his drink thoughtfully. "Yeah, it is, but I guess that's life, huh? Full of surprises." They talked for a while longer, sharing stories about their lives and laughing over silly memories. For Emma, it was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could create connections that lasted far beyond the moment itself. When Ryan finally said goodbye, promising to stay in touch, Emma stood on the porch and watched him drive away. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the air cool and refreshing. As she leaned against the railing, she realized something important. Helping Ryan hadn't just changed his life, it had changed hers too. Over the following weeks, work on the farm began to pick up speed. New machinery arrived, gleaming under the sunlight as workers installed irrigation systems and repaired old tools. Neighbors stopped by to ask what was going on, and soon the story of Emma's kindness spread throughout the community. People, who had once seen her only as the farmer's daughter, now regarded her with admiration and respect. Emma didn't let the attention go to her head, though. Instead, she threw herself into the work, determined to make the most of the opportunity she'd been given. Her father, who had initially been skeptical of the changes, quickly warmed to the idea as he saw how much easier their daily tasks became. Together they worked side by side, dreaming of new possibilities for the future. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars appear in the night sky, her father spoke up. "You know, Emma, your mom would have been proud of you. She always believed in doing the right thing no matter how hard it was." Emma smiled, feeling a pang of sadness mixed with warmth. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." Her father patted her hand gently. "Just remember, kiddo, life has a funny way of rewarding those who give without expecting anything in return. Looks like you proved that point pretty well." Emma nodded, gazing out at the fields stretching endlessly before them. The farm was still the same place it had always been, a patch of earth surrounded by woods and endless skies, but somehow it felt different now. Brighter, fuller, more alive. And as she sat there listening to the crickets chirp and the wind whisper through the trees, Emma knew one thing for sure. Kindness wasn't just about helping others, it was about creating ripples that touched lives in ways you might never expect. The weeks turned into months, and life on the farm continued to transform in ways Emma could hardly have imagined. The new equipment hummed with efficiency, cutting down on hours of labor and allowing her and her father to focus on expanding their operations. They planted more crops, repaired old fences, and even started building a small greenhouse, a dream Emma had tucked away for years but never thought possible. The Army's support hadn't just given them tools, it had given them hope. But as the physical changes unfolded, something deeper shifted within Emma too. She found herself thinking about Ryan often, not just because of the letter he'd written, or the promise he'd made to stay in touch, but because of the impact his arrival had on her perspective. Before that fateful night, she had seen her life as predictable, almost stagnant. Helping Ryan had reminded her that even in the quietest corners of the world, moments of connection could spark extraordinary outcomes. One crisp autumn morning, as Emma was harvesting pumpkins from the patch near the barn, she heard the sound of tires crunching against gravel. Looking up, she saw a familiar car pulling into the driveway. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized Ryan stepping out, still dressed casually but looking healthier and more rested than the last time she'd seen him. "Ryan!" she called out, brushing dirt off her hands as she walked toward him. "What brings you back here?" Ryan grinned, holding up a paper bag. "I come bearing gifts, fresh coffee and donuts, figured it was time I returned the favor." Emma laughed, shaking her head. "You didn't have to do that, but now that you're here, you might as well stick around. We've got plenty of work to do if you're interested." Ryan raised an eyebrow, pretending to look skeptical. "Work? On a beautiful day like this? What kind of host are you?" They both laughed, and for a moment, it felt as though no time had passed since their last meeting. Over coffee and donuts, they caught up, sharing stories about what had happened in the months since Ryan's rescue. He told her about reuniting with his unit, completing his training, and even earning a promotion for his leadership during the Way ordeal. "It's funny," he admitted, sipping his coffee. "Before all this, I wasn't sure I belonged in the military, but now I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Emma smiled, genuinely happy for him. "That's great, Ryan, you deserve it." He nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. "And what about you? How's everything going? Here?" Emma gestured around at the fields, the newly installed irrigation system, and the half-built greenhouse. "Things are good. Better than good, actually. The upgrades have made a huge difference. We're finally able to do some of the things we've always wanted to try, like planting strawberries next spring." Ryan looked impressed. "Strawberries, huh? Bold move. Those can be tricky." Emma shrugged, grinning. "We'll figure it out. We always do." After finishing their snacks, Ryan insisted on helping with the chores. Together they worked through the morning, stacking hay bales, checking on the animals, and cleaning out the barn. It was simple, satisfying work, and Emma found herself enjoying Ryan's company more than she expected. There was an ease between them, a sense of familiarity that made the hours fly by. By lunchtime, they were both covered in dust and sweat, but neither seemed to mind. Sitting on the porch steps with sandwiches in hand, they talked about the future. Ryan mentioned that his unit would soon be stationed closer to Iowa, which meant he might visit more often. "Not that I'm trying to impose," he added quickly, "but it'd be nice to see how the farm's coming along, and maybe learn a thing or two about farming myself." Emma chuckled, nudging him playfully. "Well, if you're serious, I could teach you. Though fair warning, it's harder than it looks." "I'll take my chances," Ryan replied with a grin. As the afternoon wore on, Emma noticed a change in Ryan's demeanor. He grew quieter, his smile fading slightly as he stared off into the distance. Sensing something was on his mind, she asked, "What's wrong? You seem distant." Ryan hesitated, then sighed. "It's nothing bad, I promise, just I've been thinking a lot lately about what happened that night, about how much your kindness changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone involved." Emma tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "When I got back to the unit, Captain Mitchell told me something I didn't know at the time. Apparently, the search for me wasn't just about finding one lost soldier. It was also a test, a training exercise to see how the team handled real-world challenges. They weren't expecting anyone outside the military to get involved, let alone someone who went above and beyond like you did." Emma frowned, unsure where this was going. "Okay, so, Ryan continued, because of what you did, the entire operation was deemed a success. Not only did they find me, but they learned valuable lessons about working with civilians and adapting to unexpected situations. And because of that, The battalion received special recognition and funding to improve their training programs. Emma blinked, stunned. Wait, you're saying my actions helped your whole unit? Ryan nodded. Exactly. You didn't just save me, Emma. You helped make us better, stronger. For a moment, Emma didn't know what to say. The idea that her simple act of kindness had rippled outward, touching lives far beyond her understanding, left her speechless. Finally, she managed a soft laugh. I guess I should stop underestimating myself, huh? Ryan smiled warmly. Definitely. You've got a gift, Emma. Don't ever forget that. Later that evening, after Ryan had left promising to return soon, Emma sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was ablaze with fiery hues of red and orange, mirroring the warmth she felt inside. Her conversation with Ryan replayed in her mind, filling her with a quiet sense of pride. Her father joined her a few minutes later, settling into the chair beside hers. Ryan seemed like a good kid, he said, breaking the silence. Glad he came by. Emma nodded, still gazing at the horizon. Yeah, me too. He told me something today. Something I didn't realize until now. Oh? Her father prompted, glancing at her curiously. He said my decision to help him didn't just affect him, it affected his whole unit. Their training improved because of what I did. Isn't that wild? Her father chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. Not really. Like I said before, kindness has a way of spreading. You plant a seed and sometimes it grows into something bigger than you ever imagined. Emma smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunities she'd been given, but for the reminder that even the smallest choices could make a difference. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, she realized something important. Life wasn't just about surviving. It was about connecting, growing, thriving. And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt truly ready to embrace whatever came next. Winter arrived quietly, wrapping the farm in a blanket of snow that sparkled under the pale sunlight. The fields lay dormant, resting after months of hard work, while Emma and her father focused on indoor projects and planning for the coming spring. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm, a mix of routine and anticipation. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something new was waiting just around the corner. One chilly morning, as she sipped hot cocoa by the kitchen window, she noticed a letter tucked into the mailbox outside. It wasn't often they received mail this time of year, so curiosity drove her to bundle up and fetch it. The envelope bore the Army's insignia, and her name was neatly typed across the front. She carried it inside, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. Inside was an invitation, formal and printed on heavy paper. The Army wanted to recognize her contributions at a special ceremony being held at a nearby base. There would be speeches, awards, and even a tour of the facilities. A handwritten note from Captain Mitchell accompanied the invitation. Dear Miss Carter, we hope you'll join us as we honor those who have made a difference in our mission. Your actions inspired not only Private Ryan, but also his entire unit. Please, accept this small token of our gratitude. We look forward to seeing you there. Sincerely, Captain Mitchell. Emma stared at the words, her heart swelling with emotion. She hadn't expected anything like this, not after all the changes her kindness had already brought. Still, she felt a flicker of nervousness. Public recognition wasn't something she was used to, and the idea of standing in front of soldiers and officers made her uneasy. Her father, reading over her shoulder, gave her a reassuring pat on the back. You've earned this, kiddo. Don't shy away from it. I know, Emma replied softly, setting the letter down. It's just, I didn't do it for the attention. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Her father nodded. And that's exactly why they want to honor you, because not everyone would have done what you did. After some thought and encouragement from her father, Emma decided to attend. The days leading up to the ceremony were filled with preparation. She dug out her best dress, cleaned her boots until they shone, and practiced smiling politely in the mirror. On the day of the event, she and her father drove to the base, both feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. The base was bustling with activity when they arrived. Soldiers moved briskly between buildings, vehicles lined the parking lot, and flags fluttered in the crisp air. Emma was greeted warmly by Captain Mitchell, who introduced her to several officers and members of Ryan's unit. To her relief, Ryan himself was there, looking sharp in his uniform and grinning widely when he saw her. "You made it," he said, giving her a quick hug. "I'm glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it," Emma replied, smiling despite her nerves. "Though I still feel a little out of place." Ryan shook his head firmly. "Don't. You belong here as much as anyone." The ceremony itself was simple yet moving. Officers spoke about teamwork, resilience, and the importance of community support. When it was Emma's turn to step forward, Captain Mitchell presented her with a plaque engraved with a heartfelt message of thanks. As she accepted it, applause erupted from the crowd, and she felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. Afterward, during the reception, people approached her one by one to express their gratitude. Some shared stories of how her kindness had inspired them. Others simply thanked her for reminding them of the value of compassion. By the end of the evening, Emma felt a profound sense of connection, not just to the soldiers but to humanity as a whole. In the weeks that followed, life returned to its usual pace. Spring arrived, bringing with it the promise of growth and renewal. The strawberry plants Emma had dreamed of planting finally took root, their tiny green leaves peeking through the soil. Neighbors stopped by more frequently, eager to see the improvements on the farm and offer their own help when needed. The once isolated farmhouse now felt like the heart of a thriving community. Ryan visited regularly, sometimes alone and sometimes with friends from his unit. They brought laughter and camaraderie, turning quiet evenings into lively gatherings. Together they worked on projects, shared meals, and talked late into the night about dreams and aspirations. Through it all, Emma realized how much her world had expanded since that fateful night when a lost soldier knocked on her door. One afternoon, as she and Ryan sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if you hadn't helped me?" Emma considered the question, gazing out at the fields bathed in golden light. "Sometimes. But then I remind myself that it's not worth dwelling on what-ifs. What matters is what happened, and what we choose to do next." Ryan smiled, nodding. "Well, whatever happens next, I'm glad I met you. You changed my life, Emma. In more ways than one." Emma returned his smile, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "You changed mine too, Ryan. More than you know." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple, Emma leaned back in her chair, letting the peacefulness of the moment wash over herself. Her journey, from a quiet farmer's daughter to a symbol of kindness and strength, had been unexpected, challenging, and rewarding all at once. And though she knew life would always hold surprises, she felt ready to face them. For the first time in years, Emma truly believed in the power of connection, the idea that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples far beyond what she could imagine. And as she watched the stars begin to twinkle in the vast night sky, she knew one thing for certain: her story was just beginning.